Chapter 11. Death Mountain. Lifeless. Barren. A stark contrast to the vibrant greens of Hyrule Field and the Lost Woods. These were Link's first impressions of Death Mountain. The only vegetation that grew here were small and stunted weeds that struggled through cracks in the brown and gray rocks. There were no birds, nor the chirping of insects or the croaking chorus of frogs that was so familiar to him. It was just a rugged track that cut a swath across the desolate mountainside. How could anything live here? When Link and Navi had left Kakariko, they'd come across houses half buried amidst the rocks. Ruins dotted the hillside like tombstones. The broken and cracked fragments of a wall told him there had been a great disaster here. Link wondered what had transpired, but to his disappointment, Navi wouldn't give him an answer. Link walked beyond the shattered stones and up the lifeless hills. Soon, the only signs of anything ever inhabiting the rugged slopes were the scattered bones of goats and other animals. These scattered remnants of doomed animals made Link think that perhaps Death Mountain was not such an inappropriate name after all. That morning, they had started out early from Kakariko Village, purchasing some supplies as they left. Link's hooded dark red cloak was now draped across his shoulders as a bitterly cold wind threatened to throw him off the road. He still had the bag Saria had given him all those weeks ago, and he found himself muttering a thank you to her. Just as Saria had said, the bag was surprisingly light despite the gear in it, including what felt like half of Zora River. At the thought of Saria, the hole in his chest that home once filled ached. Malon and Talon had done their best to fill that lonely chasm, but they had never been able to fill it. Not completely. The mountain seemed to suck every last drop of moisture out of Link, and soon several of his water skins were empty. Navi kept telling him to go easy on the water so there'd be enough to reach Goron City, no doubt hoping he would stop complaining every time he needed to make a toilet stop and wanted some privacy. Once the sun rose to its zenith, there was no shade to be found along the arid mountain path, and Link placed his cloak back in his bag. Before long, he was drenched in sweat and was quite sure his worn boots would melt under the relentless heat of the sun. He would hate to know what climbing this mountain would be like in summer. The path seemed to go on forever, cutting a dizzying zigzag up the mountain before it straightened and curved around the mountain's flank. At the top of the switchback road, a steep drop-off on one side offered a view of the path they had so far traversed. From where he stood, Link looked out over the distant roofs of Kakariko Village, seeming so small from his vantage point. To the south, he could see the shimmering green canopy of the Lost Woods, the Zora River cutting a winding path through its center. Link stared back at the distant woods for some time, thinking of Saria and his promise to return. Was she still waiting for him? Even after all this time?
You can go back soon,
Navi said, following his gaze.
We just have to get the spiritual stones and give them to Impa and Zelda.
Do you wonder what Saria and the others are doing now? Link asked her. You know, after what happened? Navi hesitated, her expression troubled.
The Kokiri elders will have worked it out, I'm sure.
I bet Mito's convinced them to blame me, Link sulked. The sight of home so far away reawoke the memory of his departure. He was always blaming me for something. He heard Navi's quiet sigh.
Link,
she said softly.
Most of the Kokiri know there was no way you could have harmed the great Deku Tree. Or would have.
Except I ran away, and that was nearly 7 weeks ago. Link's face fell, his gaze drifting towards his dust-smeared boots. Mito will have convinced them it was my fault. Navi's face was etched with concern now.
You did nothing wrong.
This prompted no reply, so Navi persisted.
There was nothing you could do. You didn't curse the great Deku Tree. Ganondorf did.
Yeah, you told me, Link murmured.
We can still make this right, Link,
Navi said, her voice determined.
Let's just focus on getting the stones before anything else happens. Deal?
Link nodded. Deal.
Good.
Navi sounded relieved.
Come on, we should keep moving.
Swallowing his doubts and fears as best he could, Link held his head high and trudged on along the arid track. They soon came to a place where the road split in two. One track led up to a flat shelf where the mountainside had been cut away. The second track meandered further along the mountain, past the shelf and out of sight. Link took the first road, noticing that there were fewer ruts in the dirt, meaning this particular track was not as well traversed.
Navi, are you sure this is the right way?
He asked, dreading the thought that they were lost.
Yes,
Navi affirmed.
I've been here before.
Is this where you came last night? Link asked, intrigued.
Yes, the Great Fairy of Death Mountain lives this way, beyond the Goron settlement,
she said as Link began making his way up the switchback.
I've never met a Great Fairy.
Link knew there was one in the forest, though he wasn't able to recall her name. She was said to be very reclusive, and it was not unusual for her to go unseen for months or even years at a time.
They aren't very common,
Navi said, sounding pleased that she distracted him from their earlier conversation.
Perhaps we can visit Elysia once we're finished with the Gorons.
I'd like that, Link said. And then suddenly a question sprung to mind. Is it true what Bryn told me? That they don't wear anything?
What?
Navi nearly came to a halt, losing altitude as she did so.
No, of course not.
There was a hint of laughter in her voice as she added,
I think he was just pulling your leg.
Bryn's always making stuff up, Link admitted. I didn't really believe him. What's that noise? They had just rounded one final bend in the road when Link heard a sound like someone chipping away at rock.
Possibly Gorons,
Navi suggested. As he reached the shelf, the noise grew louder. He could hear voices ahead, deep and rumbling, unlike any creature he'd heard before. Link soon discovered the source. On one side of the ledge, 3 Gorons were picking away at a boulder, the shafts of their pickaxes resembling long, thick logs. One of the Gorons peered over at Link as he approached. It tapped its nearest companion on the shoulder and pointed towards the Kokiri. The Goron's brethren looked over, lowering their pickaxes. Link noticed the colors on the rock-like scales of each of the Gorons were slightly different, but that was the only way he could tell them apart.
Look, brothers! If it isn't a forest child!
Announced the Goron who'd first noticed Link.
Must mean good luck. He can't be a forest child. They can't leave the woods.
The second Goron countered, not as enthused by the sight as his friend.
Either way,
intervened the third Goron.
Death Mountain is no place for a child. There is a dragon here that eats children for its supper.
He's lying,
Navi whispered before Link could ponder on this.
I'm not scared of dragons,
he declared, sounding far more confident than he felt. The sight of the Gorons was worrying him more than the talk of dragons.
Ha!
The second Goron laughed.
You ever seen a fully grown dragon, kid? They got teeth as big as you. Don't scare him, Onyx,
said the Goron who'd spoken first before offering Link a smile.
My name is Jasper. What are you doing here? This is no place for a forest child.
We're looking for Darunia to ask about the spiritual stone of fire,
Link answered. Link saw the dismay in Navi's eyes and realized that this might have been a bit too much information to share. A heartbeat later, his suspicion turned to fear. At the mention of the spiritual stone, Onyx's expression immediately grew dark, and Link took a step back, all too aware of the steep drop behind him.
First a Gerudo, and now this?
Onyx rumbled.
Go home, whelp! We have no business with your kind.
Jasper looked appalled.
That is no way to treat a guest, Onyx.
Shaking his head, Jasper regarded Link with an apologetic look.
Don't mind him. If you want to speak to Darunia, go ahead. You will find him within his chambers in our city.
Jasper pointed to the path that veered off to his left and around a bend.
Another switchback,
Link thought. He was really beginning to dislike them.
I doubt he will give you an audience. He hasn't left his room all day, Jasper added. You're welcome to try. Perhaps you will have more luck at speaking to him than I or the elders did.
Onyx snorted disdainfully. I doubt that.
Is Darunia sick?
Link asked. The idea of being turned away now after he had climbed all the way up the mountain was not appealing. Sick? Jasper almost sounded incredulous. No, not really. The Goron jabbed his thumb towards the large boulder he'd been chipping away at. Things have not been going well here. A few days ago, a Gerudo man came and sealed this cavern after Darunia refused to give him the Goron ruby. With all access to the mines blocked, we cannot trade. We should have this clear soon, commented the third Goron. I just hope that Gerudo man wasn't serious when he said he would set the Dodongos on us if we got into the cavern. Darunia did not seem to think it was a jest, Jasper said grimly. Onyx shrugged. Well, there's only one way to find out. We should keep working. I don't feel like getting a headbutt from Darunia again, Jasper said. What? Link couldn't help but envisage meeting a similar fate, not liking the sounds of this Darunia at all.
What do you mean by headbutt?
It was a simple disagreement. Something to do with a letter from King Nohansen, Jasper explained, sounding as though headbutting someone during an argument was entirely normal. Let's just say Darunia doesn't like being ignored.
We'll keep that in mind,
Navi chimed, gesturing for Link to get a move on. The Hylian king is soft. He's probably scared of Darunia. Hylian, Zora, all soft. Not like us Gorons. Onyx looked down at Link, who returned the Goron's level stare. Navi settled onto the boy's shoulder.
Come on,
she hissed.
Hurry up and move.
Heeding her words, Link left the trio of Gorons to their work.
Why do you reckon they were using picks?
Link asked Navi as he trudged along the path.
Gorons eat rocks, right? So, couldn't they just eat their way through the boulder?
Maybe it doesn't taste nice,
Navi suggested, smiling slightly at Link's assessment.
Or perhaps not all rocks are good for them.
How does that work?
Link asked, befuddled by the idea.
You'd have to ask a Goron.
The path forked again, and yet another switchback path led up towards the mountain's summit. Thankfully for Link, there was a second, less rough trail that turned around a bend.
I hope I'm getting close,
he thought. The path led to a rock shelf that looked as though it had been carved out of the mountainside by giants. There was a balustrade along the shelf's edge, the stonework fashioned to resemble a dragon's smooth scales. Link walked under the shadow of a rocky archway, taking little notice of the engravings etched in the rocks.
Finally, some shade,
he thought with a relieved sigh. Link paused, contemplating a moment's rest out of the sun, just long enough to catch his breath and have a drink. He was also aware of just how hungry he was. Thinking that a short respite sounded like a good idea, he made a beeline for a cave in the rocks where he could sit for a moment. As he rounded the boulders that obscured his view of the cave's mouth, Link realized the cave was already occupied. What he saw nearly sent him running back down the mountainside. Curled up within the shade was a long, serpentine creature. Its scales were ruby red, and two black, leathery, bat-like wings were tucked tightly against its body. The dragon was so large that it could have used Link's Kokiri blade as a toothpick. It was asleep, mercifully, so Link decided to leave it that way and sneak around it. Unfortunately, his luck had run out. As soon as he took one step, the creature's eyes opened. The mind of the gigantic reptile touched Link's own. It raised its enormous head, sniffing the air as Link backed away in alarm. Curiosity flowed through the bond that formed between them, but there was also a hint of wariness that sent Link's heart pounding with fear.
At least it's not hungry,
he thought meekly. Well, he hoped it wasn't.
That,
Navi said,
is a dragon. Must be the same one Impa mentioned.
It has been some time since a Hylian has come into this realm, the dragon said with a voice that boomed in Link's mind. Never have I seen such a tiny pink-skinned Hylian make it all the way here, and alone at that.
I'm not Hylian,
Link stammered, voice pitched with fear.
I'm Kokiri.
The difference matters not, so long as you are not a Gerudo, the dragon replied. What brings one so young up here?
I'm looking for Darunia.
Darunia? What would Darunia want with you?
I'm after the spiritual stone of fire.
The dragon's eyes narrowed at the mention of the stone, and a growl rose in the beast's throat. Link gulped. He really needed to be more careful when choosing his words. You are not the first to come seeking this ruby, the dragon said, inclining its head and moving towards Link so that its nostrils were mere inches from his face. It sniffed again, and Navi had to fly away to avoid being inhaled. You don't smell like one of Ganondorf's minions. Tell me, child, why are you after this stone? You have another spiritual stone on you, one emanating earth magic. I can sense it.
I was told to give them to Princess Zelda,
Link replied hurriedly, his voice growing even squeakier than normal. The dragon's nostrils flared, and it gave a loud rumbling grunt. Why would the king give a small pink-skinned boy this task? As it is, his daughter is no older than 10, yes? Hardly an age to be deciding the fate of an entire realm. There was clear suspicion in the dragon's tone. Link's heart beat faster, every instinct telling him to run. He knew that the wrong answer would likely be dangerous. He cast a quick glance at Navi, who looked worried as well.
The king did not task us with this errand. Lady Impa sent us,
Navi explained, and Link held up his hand so the dragon could see the Sheikah's ring.
King Nohansen is not well, and his council is under an evil spell. Ganondorf is controlling them.
I see. The dragon did not sound convinced. What does the Sheikah plan to do with these stones? If they fell into the wrong hands, they could bring misery not only on Hyrule, but on all the 10 kingdoms.
That's why Impa sent us!
Link flinched as Navi shouted at the top of her lungs.
We will make sure that doesn't happen!
What of the ones whose ancestors crafted the stones? The dragon asked. What is their say in this? Link cast a blank and worried look at Navi. He'd never considered that question, and he certainly didn't know the answer.
Who?
He asked before realizing that was probably a stupid thing to ask.
I was never told of that. Do you mean the Sheikah?
Not the Sheikah. The dragon sounded annoyed, and Link's mouth went dry. Perhaps I presume too much. I am certain that Darunia will discern the truth of your words. The dragon's eyes flickered between the boy and his fairy, the silence seeming to last for an eternity. Go, and let me rest. Perhaps Darunia will talk to you, the dragon said finally. You never gave me your name, little one.
Link,
the Kokiri stammered, feeling dizzy and almost as weak as he had when he faced the Goma Queen. Well met then, Link. I am Volvagia. So long as your intentions aren't treacherous, you are welcome here. If you can convince Darunia the royal family sent you, maybe he will grant you an audience. But I would not count on it. Perhaps if you know a tune that can cheer him up, that may work. But do not try asking one of the Gorons to sing. It gives me a headache when they try.
I'll keep that in mind,
Link said. Volvagia replied with a soft growl before curling back up and folding his wings. Eager to leave the dragon to its rest, Link trudged along the path until he came to the entrance of another cave. 2 Gorons standing on either side of the wide fissure cast him inquisitive glances. When Link showed them his ring, they immediately let him pass.
Hopefully they're all that easy to convince,
he thought, doubting he would be so lucky. As he stepped into the cave, his eyes took a moment to adjust to the dim glow of firelight as it danced off the cave walls. At first, he wasn't sure what he was seeing. The cave opened up before him into a chamber so large that the Gorons on the far side looked small and insignificant. Tunnels led deeper into the city, and just before Link, the cave floor disappeared into what he first assumed was a hole. On closer inspection, he realized it was a series of tiered ledges cut into rock, with Gorons moving along each of the terraces on their various errands.
How are we going to find Darunia in this?
He wondered. His heart thumping in his chest, he approached a guard standing nearby.
Can't be as bad as asking a dragon for directions,
he thought, swallowing his fear.
Can you tell me where Darunia's chambers are?
He asked. To his relief, the guard obliged. Tunnel on the far side, turn right, stairs, left, down more stairs, next tunnel, stairs. It was a good thing Navi was with him. By the time the guard's lengthy set of directions was over, Link was struggling to make heads or tails of them. So, with Navi taking the lead, Link worked his way down the labyrinth of tunnels and stairs. He finally reached the bottom of the chamber, having received many curious glances from the Gorons, especially those who noticed his Goron steel blade. He came to one last tunnel at the bottom of the terraces, 2 guards standing on either side of the entrance. As Link approached, the 2 guards crossed their spears and looked down at him. Their expressions were curious, but Link still found their stance threatening.
I'm looking for Darunia, leader of the Goro clan,
he piped up, wishing his voice didn't sound so squeaky.
I was told he was through here. I bear a message from Lady Impa.
He struggled to recall the words he'd rehearsed with Navi, and was sure his speech would have sounded far more impressive if he was just a few inches taller. The guard on the right chuckled, but a glare from his companion silenced him. Outsiders aren't allowed in, the guard announced, seemingly unimpressed with Link's speech.
Lady Impa, advisor to King Nohansen, sent word we were coming.
Navi stepped in before Link could respond. The Sheikah? The guard cast a dubious look at Link. Everyone knows of her. She is the hero of Kakariko and the Free Sheikah, after all. So, did you hear about her at an inn? From a minstrel's tale, perhaps? Neither guard seemed to believe him, and Link was suddenly worried they would throw him out. What really brought you up here, boy? The first Goron asked. Did you hear of our grand treasures and come to see them for yourself? Navi made a frantic noise beside his ear and whispered,
Try playing the song Impa taught you.
Impa said she would give you a song to identify us by.
Link took out his ocarina and held it for inspection. The guard stared at it for a moment, glanced at his ring, then looked at his instrument again. Well, that is what Impa told us. All right, can you play it? The Goron's tone gave Link no doubt that he expected the boy to falter there and then. Holding the delicate instrument, Link played the peaceful melody of Zelda's Lullaby. To his relief, he did not make a mistake. That's the one. I still have my doubts, though. The second guard's eyes narrowed suspiciously. I'm sure Darunia will be able to determine whether or not you're a messenger soon enough. Go on through the tunnel. Do be careful, the first guard said. Darunia has been in a foul temper since that Gerudo man came. I would rather not have to go cleaning bits of you off the wall. Link did not find those last words at all comforting. The tunnel was short and led Link into a chamber that was comparatively smaller than the one he'd just left. It was decorated by murals etched into the walls, and a single table, along with a few chests, stood at the far end of the room. What caught Link's attention was the room's sole occupant, whose imposing figure stood in the chamber's center. Darunia was twice the height of his brethren. His limbs were as thick as tree trunks and rippling with muscle. Oddly, there were long, jagged bits of rock growing from beneath his chin that resembled a stone beard. Silver bracelets adorned Darunia's arms and legs, glistening golden in the torchlight. Link could just make out the diamond-shaped tattoo with 3 triangles above them painted on the Goron's arms. Darunia watched the boy with a scowl. His black eyes narrowed.
Darunia?
Link said meekly. He approached slowly, leaving plenty of room in case Darunia accidentally mistook him for an annoying critter. Navi was more likely to be mistaken for one than he was. She seemed to realize this and kept a respectable distance. Are my guards giving leave for anyone to enter my chambers now? Darunia boomed, sounding insulted. I don't have time for children.
I am a messenger from the royal family,
Link announced. Darunia's scowl deepened, and he growled softly. Have I fallen so low in the sight of the king that he sent a boy as his messenger?
Impa said you would be expecting us.
Navi chimed in. I was expecting someone taller, Darunia growled. Much taller.
If you really are a messenger, tell Impa she isn't having the stone.
Not deterred by Darunia's speech, not yet at least, Link stood his ground, meeting the Goron's glare. He'd have to think of something fast. Darunia's eyes rose in surprise when Link did not flinch or move.
I mean it, boy! Take your large firefly and get out!
Darunia shouted, his voice reverberating throughout the chamber. Navi looked rather cross at being called a large firefly, but didn't say anything.
But
I am not letting go of that stone! If Impa wants it so badly, tell her to come and deal with this mess Ganondorf has caused me! Better yet, she can explain why Ganondorf has not been brought before the Royal Council to answer for his actions!
Darunia turned away from Link, looking down at a stone bench behind him. On it lay a polished hammer with runes engraved along its side. It was not the runes that captured Link's attention, but rather the fact that the head of the giant hammer was nearly as big as he was. Darunia grasped its handle tightly with both hands, and for a horrible moment, Link feared he was going to end up splattered against the wall. Wary, he twisted around towards the door, preparing to flee.
I should have killed that Gerudo on sight. He is trouble,
Darunia growled, his gravelly voice deepening. He didn't lift the hammer, and while Link was relieved, he didn't take that as a sign that he could relax.
I cannot risk the stone falling into his hands. Do you have any idea what would happen if he got it? Things would get far worse. Not just for the Gorons, but for all of the 10 kingdoms.
he has already killed the guardian of one of the other spiritual stones,
Navi said.
If you give us the stone, we can help you.
There was the briefest look of shock on Darunia's face, and then his face hardened.
For all I know, this is some kind of trick. I will not give you the stone. Now go before I throw you out!
But,
Link sputtered, not wanting to be defeated so easily, but also aware of how much damage the Goron could do.
Go!
Link managed not to flinch as Darunia turned and his roar thundered throughout the room. Link was about to do exactly that when he thought of something. It may help if you know a tune that can cheer him up. Volvagia had mentioned playing a song, but Link wasn't entirely sure that would be helpful now. Saria's song was a light and cheerful tune, but if Darunia didn't agree with that assessment, he could very well become Kokiri paste. The earth magic in his ocarina seemed to magnify the effect of the song when he played it. If he left now, he would have come for nothing and would be forced to return to Impa empty-handed. Not willing to give up so easily, yet wary of the fact that playing the song badly might be fatal, Link retrieved his ocarina.
Perhaps I did not make myself clear,
Darunia growled dangerously as Link put the instrument to his mouth.
I said leave, so unless you want me to feed you to...
A strange calm seemed to settle over Darunia as Link started playing. Link felt it too, a strange power resonating from the ocarina. It was like the power that resonated from the emerald in his pocket, only magnified, and it reminded him of the odd peace he'd once felt when touching the great Deku Tree. Darunia's furious demeanor melted as he bobbed his head to the rhythm of the music flowing from the ocarina and echoing through the room. He tapped his feet, and before Link knew it, Darunia was dancing, arms swinging, feet pounding in a wild jig. Darunia's face broke into a broad grin, his head still bobbing up and down with the beat. The cave seemed to shudder, and clouds of dust fell to the ground. Link stepped away, worried that he would get trodden on. He slowly lowered the ocarina, mouth agape as he stared in astonishment.
it actually worked!
Darunia finally stopped, and, despite breathing heavily, he looked far more relaxed than he had a moment ago. Confusion was written on his face, as though he was struggling to make sense of what he'd just done. He certainly wasn't the only one.
That song, I don't know what came over me. When you played it, I could see a forest in my mind. It was so real, it almost felt like I was there. I could feel the wind, smell it, hear the leaves rustling in the soft breeze. I have been stuck in these caves too long.
He stared at the ocarina in Link's hand with renewed interest.
You're from the forest, aren't you? I knew the Kokiri possessed magic, but never imagined they made instruments infused with it. You have almost convinced me that you are not a minion of Ganondorf. What is your name, kid?
Link!
Link's voice sounded unnaturally high as he tried to overcome his surprise at Darunia's behavior.
Well, Link, I am Darunia, chief of the Hyrulean Gorons.
It's an honor to meet you, Darunia, sir. Link couldn't understand why Hylians were so hung up on formalities.
Darunia is fine.
The Goron's beaming smile faltered slightly as he noticed Link's startled expression.
Sorry if I scared you before. Things have been difficult since that damned Gerudo King showed up.
That's okay, Link replied weakly.
Pity you caught us at such a bad time,
Darunia growled softly.
A week ago, the halls of this city would have rung with the sound of blacksmiths' hammers.
Link tried to look impressed despite having almost no idea what Darunia was talking about.
We are skilled smiths, but with the lack of food and the mines blocked, most of my clan has moved deeper into the Goron Mountains.
Darunia paused, looking down at Link thoughtfully. His lips tightened as he rubbed 2 fingers on his pointy chin.
Impa said she wanted to use the Goron Ruby to stop Ganondorf from getting the Triforce. I trust that Sheikah, so I'm sure she knew what she was doing when she sent you. Tell you what, I'll give you the stone.
Link's heart soared with relief.
Just one thing.
Link's heart promptly sank back down.
I need to make sure you are definitely who you say you are and not...
Darunia paused. Thump. 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 Thunderous footsteps shook the cavern as 2 of the Gorons Link had met earlier burst into the cave. Link darted out of the way as they came to stand before their chieftain.
Jasper? Onyx? What are you 2 doing?
Darunia asked when the Gorons came to a stop where Link had been standing.
It's the cavern! We managed to remove the last of the boulder when a giant Dodongo attacked us!
Jasper said. Link was surprised at how terrified the Goron looked. What kind of creature was this giant Dodongo if it could instill such fear in a Goron?
Where is Ilum? He was with you, wasn't he?
Darunia demanded.
The Dodongo killed him.
Link could not believe what he was hearing, feeling as horrified as Jasper and Onyx looked. He did not think there were any creatures on Death Mountain that could harm a Goron, except maybe Volvagia. Darunia was taken aback. His mouth fell open before he promptly frowned.
How? It was enormous, at least twice as big as you, Darunia, Jasper exclaimed. It only retreated because Volvagia attacked it. How could it possibly be that big?
Darunia breathed in bewilderment.
If I may, we saw something similar in the Kokiri forest,
Navi squeaked. Jasper and Onyx looked around a moment before spotting the speaker above Link's head.
It was an insect, bewitched by a curse so that it grew to an enormous size.
Ganondorf,
Darunia growled softly. The room went silent. Then Darunia turned, and with a roar, he punched the wall beside him.
Whoa! Definitely a good thing Darunia didn't object to my earlier performance,
Link thought as he stood transfixed at the sight of the crater Darunia made. It was several feet in diameter, and the surrounding walls had cracked.
Meet me at the ledge above the cavern. I will be there in a moment,
Darunia ordered the 2 Gorons. His breathing was still heavy, and Link wasn't convinced he had finished breaking things.
Ganondorf will rue the day he has brought this curse on us. I'll find him and grind his head into the ground.
Jasper and Onyx left. Link had half a mind to follow them, not wanting to stick around to see if Darunia would accidentally splatter him in a rage.
Link, I have an idea. I wanted to know if I could trust you,
Darunia said as Link went to leave.
I suspect Impa will not approve, but here's your chance.
My chance?
Link's voice wavered fearfully as he turned around, doing his best to keep a straight face despite a very strong urge to run.
You help me clear Dodongo's cavern, and I'll give you the stone.
How? Link wanted to ask. There was a creature out there that just killed a Goron! The fear must have shown on his face because Darunia gave him an amused smile.
Don't worry, he said. I have just the thing.
He pointed beside the bench with the hammer to an opened chest. Peering inside, Link saw some purple round spheres that were solid and heavy.
What are those?
He asked, picking one up. Navi recognized them.
You keep bombs in here?
she asked, slightly concerned.
Aren't you worried about burying yourself?
Then she noticed what Link was holding.
Put that back!
She all but screamed.
What?
Link asked, bewildered by her alarm.
They can kill you!
Navi added.
Put it down, right now!
Link dropped the explosive as though it were a poisonous arachnid.
What do they do exactly?
He asked.
They blow up.
A blank look met her words.
You know how a burning log sometimes explodes if it has a lot of moisture in it?
Link nodded slowly.
Sort of.
Well, it's sort of like that, only much larger.
Understanding what she meant, Link backed away from the chest. Darunia chuckled.
Don't worry. They only explode if you know the proper incantation to light the fuse. Or if they're exposed to very hot flame, hot enough to melt a Dodongo's hide. These are only small ones.
Link was quite sure having explosives so close to him was something to be concerned about.
What's an incantation?
Realizing his slip, Link felt suddenly foolish.
Can you show me how it works?
Darunia chuckled.
Best if I show you outside. But for now,
he gestured a hand towards the chest.
Take some. You'll need them to fight the Dodongos unless you plan on using your fists, which might be slightly lethal for you. I have a sword,
Link offered, noticing that Navi looked like she wanted to object. Darunia chuckled.
A sword won't do nothing to a Dodongo.
Link stared at Darunia in sheer terror.
You'll be fine,
Darunia assured him. It wasn't much of a reassurance. When Navi gave him a dubious look, Darunia added,
Really, if you are in Impa's service, I doubt she'll thank me for returning you in pieces. You'll be safe. I hope you're right,
Link muttered. Reluctantly, he stepped forward and started putting the bombs in his bag. Darunia, oblivious to Link's discomfort, picked up the hammer off his stone bench.
Well, Link of the Kokiri, are you ready to show Ganondorf what happens when he messes with a Goron?
Yeah, was all Link managed.
Ha! That's the spirit!
Darunia chuckled approvingly. Then he added more seriously,
And if what you say is true and Ganondorf has slain the great Deku Tree, then we will make him pay for that, too.
You knew him? Link asked, surprised.
I knew of him,
Darunia answered somberly.
Come, we better get moving. The others will be waiting. Am I ready to help them?
No, he wasn't. He was still trying to reconcile the idea that something in the Dodongo's cavern could kill a Goron. Darunia did not seem fazed by Link's hesitation. He chuckled and led Link out of the tunnel back towards the main chamber of the city. Only one thought went through Link's head as they made their way through the Goron city.
What did I just agree to?